Cool, awesome. So I'm going to finish off with this two last topics, shutdown decisions and joint costs, and just sort of look at them. So let's talk through this. So really the argument here is, the fundamental argument, although we'll look at the example in this case, is that before you shut anything down, take out or purely look at the fixed costs. Sorry, purely look at the variable costs. Look at contribution. Ask the question, is this organization, if you like, is this department bringing in contribution? If the contribution is positive, then you want to be asking questions about the way fixed costs have been allocated, right? Because that's the problem with these fixed overheads. It's the allocation, and it might be the allocation that's spilling or causing this department to look as though they have a negative sort of profit or are performing poorly. But really, if they have a positive contribution, then you want to be cautious. Right. So part of a business, again, like I say, may appear to be unprofitable. So really, you want to shut it down. But ultimately, what we're trying to see is to ask that question. So the relevant cash flows associated with closure, you need to think about the lost contribution from the area that are being closed. So that's what we want to find out. That's the relevant cost of closure. You're going to lose that contribution. But there might be some specific fixed costs from that closure. You want to be able to compare it and sort of see. And if it's worth it, then you're like, okay, that's fine. Any other reorganization costs and any other additional contribution from the alternative uses from resources. So you're almost reacting to the question. I'm not going to do this question in totality, but I'm going to talk through it and take us to the answer. So you have the scenario where you have three different departments, department 1, 2, and 3. Now we want to shut down department 3 because it looks as though it's giving us a negative profit. But look here, we have these production overheads, we have labor, and we have expenses. Now let's see what's actually going on. It says actually that production overheads of 15,000 have been apportioned. This 15,000 here has been apportioned on the basis of unit sales volume, right? So first of all, it's just an arbitrary, isn't it, overhead. No one knows how really and truly what the connection is. So we need to kind of isolate this and sort of then look at it from purely a contribution point of view. Expenses are head office overheads, again apportioned on sales volume. So head office, here we are, head office overheads. Here we are, expenses, yes. So sales of, is that again, you can see that this might be causing this to look negative. So we need to sort of think about it. So we now actually get some better drivers. We can tell that 50% of the production overheads can be directly traced to departments. So they can be allocated 2-2-1. So I can take this production overhead, scrap this whole thing out, and then split this 15,000 2-2-1. So in effect, divided by 5, that's 3. So 6, 3 actually is technically what I would look at. They're telling you first of all that that's one way to do it. And expenses, again, this has been done on the basis of similarly 60% of the expenses can be allocated 3-3-2. So 60%, and we can't allocate the rest. So I can take 60% of these expenses, so 60%, that's 24 grand, and then I can split that bit, of course, 3-3-2. So 24 divided by 8, yes, is 3. So I would have 996. Really is what they're telling me might be a better way to do this. But then I don't know what's going on with the rest. So take 24 out of there and then split that. And we'll see. I say we're just following the maths of it. 80% of the so-called direct labor is fixed and cannot be readily allocated, and the remaining 20% is variable and can be better allocated. So it's really saying that this direct labor thing here might just be salaries. So scrap all this out. Isolate what you cannot really split and just deal with the variable. So let's just aim is we need to sort of get to this kind of contribution place, and let's go to the answers. Let's TYU5 and see what the final answers look like. It's not, I mean, if you're doing this in an exam, you're just filling out those questions and you're just trying to get there. So what do we have here? So you can see here we've done some restating, if you like. So that's direct labor. Direct labor, that's all we can work with at 20%. That's the production overhead. Like I said, 331.5. Expenses were 996, and we have a positive contribution. So these are the other kind of full-on overheads that we've not been able to do much with. But the point is that at this point we can sort of say, well, we're still seeing a positive contribution coming through. So it says the department is still making a contribution of 4,561. And this loss must have been due to some inappropriate, if you like, allocation. So we have to think about, of course, like I said, if you're writing redundancy costs, loss of goodwill, just those effects, really. And you can see that's how they've really dealt with that. Right, let's go back up, and then and that's really the way I think you need to do this. And I would suggest, please, 1 second, let me just get back up here. Yeah, and I think that's kind of the big thing, the main point there. You can play around with that later on. One-off contracts, the moral of the story here is that you're always willing to accept a project as long as the marginal revenue is greater than the marginal cost. Contribution is positive, accept the project. This is typically in the short term, of course. It's a one-off contract. You can do that. That's the message. And yeah, if you're doing that, you can accept the project and by looking at all these relevant, again, like I say, these relevant costs, because you get different types of scenarios. But I'll show you them. Yeah, any price higher than the minimum will mean the company is better off accepting than rejecting. It's a one-off. And ironically, sometimes a company may be willing to accept a loss on this contract if it increases the chances of winning subsequent contracts. So you see that the whole point here is to get you thinking that in the short term, or a one-off contract, I will happily accept a loss. So, and this could be a big, I mean, these are important because what you're doing here is, again, this is really just bringing together everything we're talking about. You have this potential project coming through, cost everything in terms of what we talked earlier about relevant costing. So please, for homework, do TYU6, cost everything, and look at the price. If you like, you can see in terms of relevance, it's the relevant costs that we're looking at. Right? Remember, sunk costs are not relevant. Future costs are relevant. That's the first thing to sort of highlight. Future costs, again, like I say, are relevant. And then what they do is they kind of bring all those into play here. You know, some of it is in stock. You don't have any alternative use. And so the relevant cost, remember, becomes the selling price. So I think definitely this is one TYU that please you should definitely do and spend time on. And then, if you like, that will help you decide. But really all we're literally doing is that we're just first of all seeing whether or not all the relevant costs, whether what we're going to get, whether the contract we're going to receive, the money we're going to get for the contract will be greater than all those relevant costs. So this could be a contract, or it could literally just be MR minus an MC. So you're looking at the picture and you're looking at the question. So please, yes, have a go at TYU6 for homework. And yeah, so these are all just, again, like I say, TYUs for you to play with. The last point really that I want to highlight is this business of further processing decisions. And I mentioned at the beginning of the class that sometimes you've spent a cost producing 2 items, and you're just apportioning that cost. That's it. So after separation, you might choose to do other things. But let's just jump into it and see what we're talking about here. There are ways of apportioning these joint costs. I'm going to focus on the first 2. I'm almost going to argue this is irrelevant for now. We can come back to this later. But the key point here is that I have a joint cost. I spent $750 making these products, product A and B, so far, right? Before I go on to sell them, right? So I've made them so far. This is what I sold, but this joint cost is related to the current production. So it's not like a trick. It's just saying, how do I apportion this, split this cost? Well, you will split it. You could split it, which is what they're saying here. Sales volume of value of sales value of production, or production units. So this is production units first of all. So I mean, really, we're saying split that 750 based on the, so it's on the number of units. I'm sorry, number of kilograms produced. So that's 300. So that's £2.50 per kilogram for A and B. So it's, in a way, I know what the cost is. So now I'm going to sell. I could sell each of those right now. So that's here. Let's focus on here. Well, 80 times 5 minus 80 times £2.50, right? And so my gain, profit, so to speak, is 200 right now. And for product B, I'm selling 150 at 2. You're making a loss actually, and that's the cost of £2.50. So you have a loss. So for this one, for product A, I could argue that I could sell it now and be fine. Product B, I probably want to carry on further processing. If the question was, what's the processing? Sometimes you don't really have a choice if you're going to further process. So you might need to add some more cost to it before you do a final sell-off. But for now, this is typically very much in the chemical industry, where you have things being processed further onwards. And of course, the value of the closing stock here, you didn't sell all of A, so you have 20 left, and here you have 50 left of B. So you can see here 20 times £2.50 and 50 times £2.50. And so that's really the case. Or you could choose to split it based on the selling price. So let's look at the selling price here. If you selling price of £5 for 100 and £2 times 200. So it's really the ratio of 500 to 400, right? It's really the sales value more than less selling price. So 500 to 400, that's really 5 over 9 and 4 over 9. So I now split that cost based on that and just do everything as I've done before, literally. So you're selling your items at £5 again. You have your cost of sales here of 333, and then you have your profits, and you, if you like, again, you carry on as normal. But I mean, your cost of sales is just what is the here we are, 5 over 9. So here's your joint cost of, so it's £4.17 per kilogram here, and £1.67 per kilogram. So just multiply that £4.17 by your 80 units that you're selling. £4.17 times 18 will give you 333.66, and you have your profit margin, and you and you just value that the remaining inventory at the cost. So 20 times £4.17 is 83. 50 times £1.67 is 83. And that's really it. Again, like I say, you typically need more information to do the net realizable value. They have to give you some more information. So we almost need to complete the process. So selling prices after further processing, which is why I said we can ignore that for now. Come back to that. So really, that's really the chapter. Really, again, like I mentioned, that if you're going to be carrying on to make anything, what you want to do is that you want to consider future costs. But we'll see this definitely is jumping into kit questions now and seeing this type of thing. So you really want to decide, is it worth, if you like, selling on a particular item by comparing any revenue and any extra costs. So in a way, at this point, in terms of decision making, the joint costs are now sunk. So you now literally have to ask the question here is, what is the revenue I'm going to get from this versus what is the additional revenue versus the additional cost, if you like. And that's really the question to consider, really, with further processing. Yeah. So just looking at TYU10 to just sort of complete this. Again, like I said, it's purely about, it's all marginal. It's all marginal. So let's look at this. So it says a firm makes 3 joint products X, Y, and Z at a joint cost of 400,000. Joint costs are apportioned on the basis of weight. So we've got the joint costs out of the way. We don't really need the joint costs anymore if you really think about it. You see, because you're given some information here. So at this point, I've got this 400,000, fair enough, and I can sell each of these units at this point. This is the current selling price before we carry on, before we further process. So the decision to whether I further process really and truly has nothing to do with this 400. It's just about the future. So the question here is, if it's going to cost me an extra 800 to further process, well, the question I should be asking is, what's the additional revenue? So at this point, I'm at 200,000. If I go further, I'll go from 200,000 to 980,000. So I go further. So I'm making revenue of 780,000, but I have further processing costs of 800,000, right? Because this is telling me right now, before I go further, I can sell at 200. But if I go further, I'll be able to sell at 980, and that's additional. So it's always about the additional. So looking at this, this is not a good idea. Don't go forward, because you'll be losing 20 grand by going forward. So you should sell now based on how you choose to split this 400 and then recognize profit. Let's look at this. So here, there are no further processing costs. You're able to sell this product for 160, but if you go further, you'd sell it for 120. So that's just not a good idea. It's just not applicable. Sell it now and just deal with it, because the sales go down. So you actually have a fall there are no further processing costs. So sell it as it is. So there's nothing here to do with processing. It's just not applicable. There are no further processing costs. Here, it's again, you're at 160. If you go forward, that's an additional 440,000 profit potential versus a cost of 400,000. So you're making an additional 40 grand profitability, and that would make sense for you to go on and add that additional contribution to your market, if you like. So that's how we deal with this thing here. So I guess really the task now is to see as many questions as you can and get into the process, but at least you have the general thinking, the thought process. I definitely recommend playing around with this example, not this one, TYU 6. I think it's a good question because it's a good one to walk through yourself and see. This kind of brings together everything we've been talking about opportunity cost and relevant costs and making these type of decisions and making sure you don't include depreciation. It's a bit long, but it's a nice one to kind of work with and spend some time on. Okay, great stuff, and that brings us to the end of these classes. I'm going to aim now to try and do the relevant MCQs on this from section A. All right.